So good afternoon. It's great to see everyone here today, and I'm delighted to talk to you about the economics of virtual currency and Bitcoin. And this topic has been just an incredibly fun and exciting topic to research and learn about. It's emerged in the public imagination over the last 2 or 3 years as a key piece of technology that might really change the way finance works for consumers, for people in developing countries, and for the way that financial institutions actually conduct their business. So one of the things that's challenging about this technology is that there's so many details about it, about how it works. And just like in the early days of the internet, if you went to a conference about the internet, you would hear people talking about protocols and SMTP and FTP and how we get packets around. And really none of the things that you would talk about in that kind of a technical environment would really be important for knowing whether you should start Amazon.com or eBay, or whether you should invent PayPal, or whether Pets.com would succeed or fail. And so similarly for Bitcoin, a lot of the details of how the technology works can really be separated from what the technology is and what it does. And so what I want to talk about today is really what this technology is and what kinds of things it can empower. And then we can all sort of use our collective imaginations to think about where it's going to go. And just like having this conversation in 1993 or 1994, we could have very informed guesses based on economics and needs and shipping costs and warehouse costs and logistics and communication needs. We could make some very interesting predictions. Probably none of us would have realized how exciting YouTube or Twitter or all these other things that people figured out to do later would be. And so in a similar way, we're not going to be able to fully forecast the best uses of this new technology. So at its really fundamental level, Bitcoin is something quite simple. It's a spreadsheet. It's a big spreadsheet. Now you might think, well, wait, Lotus 123 was invented in around the 1980s. So what's new here? And in fact, really to think about the history of spreadsheets, we need to go back before they were called spreadsheets. They were actually called ledgers. And so in the beginning of commerce, in primitive economies, you might have learned in some class that people bartered, an apple for an orange, or a dead deer for a hunting knife. But in fact, that is really not how commerce emerged for the most part. Even in fairly primitive societies use ledgers going way, way back in time. So it's kind of complicated to actually have two things, one in each hand, and trade them for each other. And so it's been very natural for human societies to use ledgers to keep track of things so that I can contribute today and get something back tomorrow. So really the origin of money itself is a ledger. Before there was money, there were ledgers that kept track of who had what and who had contributed. So Bitcoin is in its essence a big spreadsheet or a big public ledger. And what it does is it keeps track of who has sent what to whom. So it's going to say that person 123 sent 1 Bitcoin to person 456. Okay? That's what it does. And that's pretty much all that it does. So how can this be so innovative and so exciting if that's all it does? Well, if you imagine for a second that we just put up a big spreadsheet that kept track of trillions of dollars and we just posted it on the internet from a server, what do you think would happen? So I might hack that server and try to change the ledger in some way. So if you're going to have a ledger that keeps track of things that are very, very valuable, it's very important that it's secure. That's one thing. And so I won't tell you how that works today, but I'll say that one of the big innovations in the invention of Bitcoin was a method to keep that ledger secure. And the way that that's done is that there's actually not one computer that's holding that ledger, because pretty much any one computer is hackable, but rather copies of that ledger are kept all over the world. And they all have to agree, not all, a majority has to agree on what the correct ledger is. And so if any one, or if even 20% or 30% of those were hacked or changed or altered in some way, that still wouldn't change the full public record. So this distributed technology, of course, only really enabled by the internet to be able to distribute something so widely and easily, is part of the security about how this works. A second thing is that if we wanted to have a big ledger to keep track of things, it would be natural to think about sort of having somebody in charge of keeping track of it. And so, you could have PayPal. PayPal creates a big ledger. If you have an account on PayPal and you send it to someone else on PayPal and you're both carrying balances, no money actually moves, just PayPal makes a debit on one side and a credit on another side, and nothing else has to happen. But now you have PayPal, a company that's keeping track of that ledger. Okay? The thing about Bitcoin is that it's an open source software protocol that allows people to make their own entries on the ledger in a decentralized fashion. So if you own a Bitcoin, that means sort of two things. One is that you have the address for the Bitcoin and someone has sent it to you. So there has to be an entry on a ledger saying you have it. But that's not enough, because you also need a security key or a password to authorize a movement of that Bitcoin to someone else. If you don't have the passcode, you can look out at that ledger and admire your beautiful Bitcoin sitting there, but you can't do anything with it. So you could say that you own it, but it's not really meaningful that you own it because you can't move it. If you have the password and you have an entry on the ledger that says it's yours, then you have something of value that you can actually do something with. And what can you do with it? Well, exactly one thing. You can authorize a movement to someone else. Okay? But hopefully that person is going to give you something back, and that's what makes it useful. Okay? So that's it. Big public spreadsheet with some passwords and some really cool ways to keep it from getting hacked. All right? So why is that important and sort of useful? Well, first of all, it's the first time that we have a purely digital asset where the whole definition of owning that asset is just the digital thing. There is no corresponding physical asset. And that's going to allow many things. Probably the easiest thing is just that I can send something of value to you digitally with the same kind of time frame and user experience as sending an email. That's something I can do globally. I can do it without asking anybody's permission, without requiring some other institution to do something for me. I can just do it. I could meet somebody on a chat room and have them email me a digital good or provide me a service, and I could send them back something of value, and we could be done in 10 minutes and never have to see each other again. Okay, that's pretty powerful. So what's going to happen is if this person wants to send a Bitcoin to someone else, they're going to have a certain address, they're going to enter their password, and they're going to authorize a movement of one Bitcoin, say, it doesn't have to be one, to someone else. And then 10 minutes later, that shows up as a new entry on the ledger. Okay? And that's an instantaneous, not quite instantaneous, but very fast movement of an asset that in a way that's really not possible using other technologies. So if you want to see how this looks from a user's perspective, a user can use something called a wallet. And a wallet is just a piece of software that looks out at that whole big ledger, which is very, very, very long by now, and looks at just the transactions that are important to you, that are associated with your addresses, and displays to you your balances. And it's just a very simple piece of software. And it'll help you keep track of your passwords and things like that. Now, as an economist, I look at this. It's very cool. It's very neat. But an important early question to ask is, well, why a Bitcoin? Did you just make up this idea of a Bitcoin either to be a Ponzi scheme or something cool, a gimmick, that makes people excited about your new product? Like, most people don't want to think about holding an asset whose value fluctuates. If you want to hold an asset, if you want to hold cash, you want to hold cash in the currency that you're going to spend it in. You don't want to walk around, holding euros if you're going to spend dollars. It's not convenient. You have to keep track of the US to euro exchange rate. And similarly, it's very inconvenient for you to hold, say, something called a Bitcoin when you're going to go ultimately pay things that are priced in dollars. So can we just get rid of this whole Bitcoin thing and use this really cool spreadsheet, but actually keep track of dollars? Okay? So let's just put dollars on a spreadsheet. Well, let's talk a minute about what that means. So the guys who invented this security technology were really, really smart. But unfortunately, they did not figure out how I could beam a dollar bill onto your keyboard. I can't go zoom and a dollar bill appears. Not possible. So if I had a password and authorized an entry on that spreadsheet that said I gave you $1, of course that would be an incomplete description of what happened because I didn't just give you $1. I just made an entry on a spreadsheet. I didn't actually physically give you $1. Maybe I promised to give you $1. Maybe somebody else promised to take $1 out of my account and put it in your account. All sorts of things might be true, but the one thing that's not true is that I just sent you $1. Okay? So this would not be a complete description of any system. What could be a complete description of a system? Well, if I, instead of saying, I'm going to send you $1 that's just a message that I would have to honor, instead, I could actually send something like an IOU. So if there's $1 on the spreadsheet that belongs to me, of course, it's not really $1 on the spreadsheet because I can't pinpoint dollars to a virtual spreadsheet. But I could have an IOU, say an IOU from Bank of America. So for that, it's useful to sort of think about what happens when you have a Bank of America account. You log into your online account, you look at the website, and you actually see it tells you you have money. Now, where is that money? It's not actually on your computer. It's not even at Bank of America because they've lent out, 95% of it to someone else. But so what is it that you're seeing when you see that you have $100 in Bank of America? You're actually seeing just a promise. Bank of America promises to give you $100 if you ask for it. That's your relationship with Bank of America. And so Bank of America could, in principle, agree that it's going to let you keep some of those dollars, like you might have 2 or 3 different checking and savings accounts. You could have another account which is exposed to some sort of virtual currency system, and when a message is sent on that ledger, Bank of America could promise to honor a contract to send that money to someone else. Okay? So if I wanted to send money to someone in Chase, I could make an entry on the spreadsheet using my password, and if Bank of America and Chase had already agreed to plug into this system, they could then respond to that by actually sending the money. Okay? Now this actually is very close to a system that we have today called SWIFT. So if you want to send money, say, to Europe, then you're going to send a message through something called SWIFT, and that message is going to say that I'm sending someone else money and whose account it's supposed to go to. But on the back end, that's not at all what happens. On the back end, say Bank of America goes to a correspondent bank, that correspondent bank goes to another correspondent bank in Europe, that correspondent bank might go to another correspondent bank in another country, and then eventually it's going to show up at the destination. So there's a whole sort of back end system behind that, and everybody has agreed, though, that if you send a SWIFT message, then everybody's going to honor that message. Okay? So that's a way, so you could think about this sort of more advanced ledger technology as something that could be used as a replacement for SWIFT, because SWIFT only works in certain countries and not everybody has agreed to follow it. However, if you were sending a digital asset like a Bitcoin, you wouldn't need the whole correspondent banking system. You could just immediately send the money. And that helps understand what the kind of benefit is of having these digital currencies rather than physical currencies. The fiat currencies from national countries require this back-end movement of money in a way that is not necessary if you're just moving a digital currency. So I was very excited about this idea, and then and I was going around giving these talks with sort of these various slides about a year and a half ago. And then I learned that a Stanford GSB alumni named Chris Larson had actually co-founded a company called Ripple that had implemented a ledger just like this. That ledger allowed you to keep not just its own native currency, which it has called the XRP, but also any other currency you wanted on the ledger. And it allowed you to use it exactly as I've described. And so today, a number of financial institutions have done just what I described. They've plugged into the Ripple ledger, and they've allowed people to put US dollar bank balances onto the Ripple ledger, and then you can use them to send money to anybody else in the world in any other currency. And so then I joined as an advisor for Ripple Labs, and now I'm on the board of directors. So it's a technology that I'm really quite excited about. As an economist, the reason this was appealing to me is that I don't want to have a bunch of consumers in a whole bunch of stable developing countries holding something other than their local currency. I would like them to think about the financial technology innovation here as one of being able to move money quickly, but not of one where you're just holding some other currency. On the other hand, if you're sitting in Argentina or Venezuela or one of these very high inflation countries, it's a completely different kettle of fish. If you're a consumer in one of those countries, you have very limited ability to save. How do you save if you're a poor consumer in a developing country with high inflation? You could buy a gold necklace. That's a popular way. Guys go to Miami and get a suitcase full of $100 bills and come around and sell them to people, and then you buy them and stuff them under your mattress. That presents some security risks for you and your family. If you're wealthy enough, maybe you buy a physical asset like a car or a tractor or a horse. But if you don't have enough money to do that, then any cash you have just gets inflated away very quickly. And so you have very little incentive to save and very little ability to get out of poverty. A technology innovation like this can allow people all over the world, even who don't have bank accounts, immediate access to international financial markets. Because all they need is sort of a mobile phone, and instead of someone walking around with a suitcase full of $100 bills, they can walk around with a phone and a little bit of cash and exchange the cash for this digital asset, which could then be converted into dollars or euros or whatever else, rather than stuffing $100 bills under your mattress. And so this is one of the areas that's actually happening now, and that's becoming very popular in these countries where the existing financial systems are quite poor. This type of technology enables a connectivity of international financial markets in a way that's just really never been possible. It's also going to make it very difficult for those countries to maintain capital controls. So right now, of course, recognizing this, they don't let people leave. That's why you have to smuggle the suitcase full of $100 bills and pay a bribe at the airport. So this is going to really change the economics, the macroeconomies of those types of countries, as it becomes impossible to really enforce capital controls in the area of digital assets that can be moved without needing to access the banking system. So let me give an example of this type of international movement of money and how it would work today. And I'll give it from the perspective of a US consumer, even though in some sense we have less need for it than many other countries in the world. So suppose I want to send some money to Japan. If it's a small dollar amount, I could actually be pretty much priced out of that transaction. You know, Western Union or something like that is going to charge me 20 to 30 bucks. If I do a bank-to-bank account transfer, that's going to cost me, 50 to 100 bucks and take a couple of days. So there aren't actually great options for making small person-to-person international payments, and this is one use case that people have started doing. So if I wanted to send money to Japan, what I could do is initiate a dollar transfer through a linked account to a Bitcoin service provider. So in the US, two of the very consumer-friendly ones are Circle and Coinbase. And so say, for example, if you want to establish an account in Coinbase, I would link up my bank account. So I've done this myself with my Bank of America account with Coinbase. And they send me, 73 cents in an ACH transaction, and I confirm the dollar amount so we know that we're linked up, our ACH is working, and I send them my passport, and they check out who I am, and I give them my credit card number if I want them to actually make funds available immediately. So if I want to, I have an immediate need, I've got to get some money to Japan, what I can do is I can just log on to that, quickly get on my account and say, oh, Coinbase, I want a certain sum of money. So I want, 100 bucks, give it to me. And because they've already verified me, they'll immediately make that available on my little online web account. Then I can look for a quote for what is the exchange price between dollars and Bitcoins right now. So there's a few exchanges, there's actually a large number of exchanges, but there's a few very big ones. One of them is called Bitstamp. And that, on say the Bitstamp exchange, you can look out and see the order book. Some people want to buy Bitcoins, other people want to sell Bitcoins, and so you can see how many Bitcoins would I get for my dollar, and I can place an order, and then within a few minutes I can exchange my dollars for Bitcoins. And in the case of Coinbase, they'll help me do that transaction. So a few minutes later, then the Bitcoins show up in my Coinbase account. Now all I need is the Bitcoin address of my friend in Japan. I tell Coinbase, send my Bitcoins there, and boom, those Bitcoins are gone. My friend in Japan has the thing of value. At that point, we can walk away. We're done. They have the thing of value. Now, my friend in Japan, if they want to get out of Bitcoin quickly, could then immediately take those Bitcoins onto an exchange that operates in the Bitcoin to yen currency pair. On that exchange, they would make another currency exchange and get their yen out and go home. Okay? So in a very short period of time, we would have moved the thing of value. There could be delays getting in and getting out, like if I didn't have my Coinbase account set up, or if there wasn't something like that in Japan, they might have to wait a little bit to turn the Bitcoin to dollars, but the point is very, very quickly they have an asset. There's a few things you have to worry about along the way, like you don't want the exchange to go bust while you're in the middle of a transaction. That would be bad, you would lose your money. But you're not going to be on that exchange very long, at least unless you want to be. So you really have to trust these exchanges for a relatively short period of time. You might also worry about fluctuations in the currency. People say, well, Bitcoin used to be $1,000 a